Essentially, Meta have lowered the VR minimum age requirement to 10. So in a highly controversial move by Mr. Zuckerberg, Meta have announced plans to lower the age of virtual reality users from 13 to 10. Some people are concerned this could lead to privacy and safety issues. Parents are worried. Other people are saying, 10 is too young, but, where do we draw the line? Could you, can a 10-year-old watch TV? Can they play on a smartphone? Is that really much different? Who knows? Keen to get your perspectives on this. Kojo, what's your point of view when you hear about Meta lowering the VR age requirement?
Before I answer, can I do a quick poll to who here has a VR headset or has used one?
Okay, so I've got a lot. I've got like the original Oculus, the new one. I've got the Google Cardboard.
Yeah, that's like the OG.
The OG. I've got like the
I used to run a company
ones
that was developing VR stuff. So
before your current place.
Of
course. Yeah. And Alex, you used VR.
I've used one once and didn't like it.
You do need to use it a little bit more to really grasp it, I believe. But I've done like the haptic suits. I've done the 360 treadmills. I've done the Tesla gloves. I've done every smellometer. I've done all the VR smell.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So I recently transitioned from where you are to somewhere in between where you guys are likely, and I've been using the Meta Quest 2, I believe, for the last year or so. And just to tie back to your original question around my thoughts on them just shifting the age. Well, I think of the whole thing a little bit more in an abstract fashion, which is what is the difference here actually with how content is consumed in other general ways? And you kind of made that point when you were asking the question, right? Like, where do you draw the line with smartphones, with TV? Yeah. Fundamentally, it's, VR, AR, and the entire kind of computerized reality space is still an interface. The content might differ in nature slightly. Obviously, it's slightly more multidimensional than it is on the screen. But fundamentally, the content is what drives controversy and what drives, what shapes people, what influences people. So I think the question for me is less to do with the device itself, but what content occupies that space and what safeguards those devices have to protect younger or more vulnerable people from the content.
It's a good way of looking at it. Yeah, it's less about the platform and more about what's on the platform is what you're saying. Yeah. Okay, as somebody who ran a VR company, what's your
I've got lots of concerns about that.
Okay, go for it.
And the reason for that is because, let me say something before that. I believe in the power of VR in terms of anything that has been shown, like neuro rehabilitation, training, surgery training. It's extremely powerful in that sort of space. And the reason why it's so powerful, it's because one of the main pillars of training and learning is the ability to go outside of your context and envisage other scenarios. Yeah. Now, you can do that through a sort of mind exercise, or you can do it through VR, which allows you, by being completely immersed, to actually almost take over your brain and think that you are in that sort of environment. And that's why it's so powerful. And we used to do experiences of, feeling like you're in between two tall buildings and trying to walk, and people could not do that, although they were in a room.
The walk, the plank, Ritchie's. Yeah.
That's how everyone started.
Yeah, it's the entry point. Yeah.
And now, that advantage also, it's something that I'm concerned in terms of reducing the age, because we do not know, and there isn't enough research to show that at 8 or 10, the children's developmental progress has finished or not. Yeah,
it's hard. It hasn't been enough time, hasn't there, to do proper research.
So I'm talking now not about some children who use it, 1 hour a week or 1 hour every 2 weeks. I'm talking about the type of use that we see with screens, with normal screens. Yeah. We do not know if by using it in a sort of regular way, at that sort of age, the vision sensors will be outweighed compared in their development compared to the touch and all sorts of other things. Yeah. And there isn't enough research to show if that's correct or not.
This is what Meta are saying in order to get this through. They're saying that there's been no data to suggest this will be harmful to children, which is
I
true.
Don't believe that. There is some research in Canada that show that actually what we thought that the development process was finishing at sort of 8
Okay.
It's now considered that it's probably 10
Okay.
or later.
Okay.
So yes, probably Meta is saying that.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the flip side, there's nothing to, there's not enough research to suggest that, it's even good for you, on the other side. What's your point, Alex? When you see this story, do you think lowering it to 10 is okay? Does that make you worried? What do you think of the story?
Yeah, I'm quite similar to the sort of, it's just a way of consuming content, but as stated up front, I've not used VR loads, so it could be that it is much more immersive than I give it credit for.
Yeah. What did you use? Was it an Oculus?
I honestly don't know.
How many years ago was it?
2.
Okay.
So it might be an Oculus.
It wasn't a smartphone. It was an.
No,
it would have been an Oculus then.
Full-on headset thing.
Yeah.
I actually found it kind of anti-immersive, but I think that's because it was so different to what I'm expecting.
Sure.
And I think, in that way, it kind of tracks, when I was younger, my parents were worried about how much screen time I was having because it was overwhelmingly more than they would have had when they were children.
Yeah.
So they worried, it's going to affect his development.
Yeah.
And it's not. I'll let my friends comment on whether it did or not. But I don't think society has sort of broadly agreed like some of it's fine.
Yeah.
I also kind of think it's cute that Meta thinks that this is going to make a huge difference. I suspect if there's parents out there who really love VR, they're probably letting their young children use it.
Yeah. If the parents want to buy it for the kid, they'll buy it for the kid, won't they? I think at the moment.
I think broadly speaking, to the platform question,
Yeah.
at least it's kind of Meta acknowledging that this is a possibility.
Yeah.
Even we're updating our rules, and that means they're going to start putting in controls, which means okay, great, you've caught up to the playing field. Like iPhones, everything they have parental controls now.
Yeah.
So good that they've caught up. Good that they're aware of this. And I think decision pending on whether or not this is something we should really control and think about, or if it's kind of like, it'll come out in the wash anyway.
I think the problem with coming up in a wash is that a lot of those things we sort of let the cat out of the bag first, and then we thought about the implications.
Afterwards,
Even thinking about the implications is a good thing, a priori before those things are out there, because the ability to consume and the desire to consume that sort of content can be quite high because it's extremely interesting. It's extremely immersive, as I said, in all sorts of non-children applications or adult applications. It has fantastic results, and it will show even more results being used more. But I would like stuff to be known and presented with facts and with some research, so that people actually take a decision which is based on facts around, how much shall I allow my kids to be in VR.
Sure.
There is a lot of concern with the younger generation in terms of the use of screens and what does it do in terms of physiological, emotional effects. And I wouldn't like to go with a powerful media in the same sort of cul-de-sac where we actually work on the effects of, regular and long-term usage.
Yeah.
After we see some sort of effects in the society.
Yeah. Well, what about the validity of the metaverse? Because if we look at what the metaverse is in terms, I know it's such a not a great word, and Apple, like spatial computing, they didn't use the word metaverse once in their Vision Pro announcement, I think really to try and get away from that branding. But if we just use metaverse as a catch-all term for people spending a large part of their day, every day, in a virtual world where they're working, where they're socializing, where they're watching movies, playing games, etc., do you think that as a concept will be a reality in, let's say, 5 years from now? Do you think in the same way that we're, addicted to, video on phones, do you think the next transition will be something in front of your eyes as a screen? Probably more on the VR angle rather than the AR angle. I'm asking this question. Metaverse is more like a VR rather than an AR company. It's a bit of both, really, we've mixed, but the VR is probably the stronger component of the two. So do you think in 5 years this metaverse will be a daily part of most people's lives, or do you think it'll be a little bit more of a flop and perhaps a tech product which people talked about, had a huge hype, and now is a little bit less relevant? I was going to say a little bit like crypto, but I do love crypto still, so I won't quite say that. And my Bitcoin is my like long term. If that took off, then there we are. We're happy. What do you think about that, Alex? You haven't really tried VR much, so start with you from the outsider perspective. Do you see this becoming successful or not?
Yeah, I mean, drawing the distinction between AR and VR, I think is important.
Yeah.
And for me, AR is much more likely to become, I think, a big thing. I've seen some really sexy products which are kind of, you know, multiple monitors for your workspace that are kind of projected into your eyes, and you have like infinite screen, which sounds wonderful. I think the problem with VR is to get like fully immersive. You need, you know, a haptic suit and a 3D treadmill. There's just a lot of stuff to carry around. Which I think is the limiting factor. It sort of locates it into a single physical space until we can solve how you move in a intuitive way in VR in reality without, you know, bumping into walls and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's always going to be its limit. And so I kind of for now see it more as a thing for gaming.
Yeah.
Where people are going to invest in these sorts of things. That said, could it improve meetings? You know, the pandemic taught us that we're going to be doing a lot of virtual meetings, potentially. But my understanding is the main problem with that isn't so much the immersiveness of the exchange, it's the latency of the call. And that's why people talk over each other and all this stuff.
Apple's will fix that because it will be basically a FaceTime call, but with a fake version of you. It's spooky. If you have
That's very interesting because... To your point, one of the stuff that's missing, it's the social cues.
Yeah.
Because when I'm looking at you, I can see you blinking. I can read. We actually know we've been trained, you know, to read those cues. So my response will somehow be changed based on what I see. You know, how you perceive what I'm saying. Yeah. You can't do that if you have a headset on. Yeah. But you can do it with the Apple one because you'll actually have an image that probably can move in real time with the movement of your face. That can be done. I'm working for a company that does that.
Trying to do it with the cartoony version. So on like the Meta Quest Pro and on the Meta Quest 3, they have got facial tracking, but it's just not as good. I mean, like, I don't know if you've had a meeting in like Horizon Workrooms, but it's terrible. Like I've had one, and it was like a Sims character speaking to me.
Yeah,
I was
it
like,
is terrible.
What is this? Like, imagine getting fired in VR. Like, it would be like the most brutal thing ever.
But I think there is a bigger point. I don't want to get into the sort of philosophical stuff of it, but it's a bigger point here, which is why do we always look for technology that can replace what we can do very well at the moment? Why don't we look for applications that actually can complement what we can do at the moment?
Yeah.
And meeting with someone is something that it's an art that we have perfected for quite a long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that those things can do? Like, for instance, AR, when I'm actually sitting in front of you and I want to show you something that's a building or whatever, and I can show it to you on the table. Yeah,
if we built up
that brings a little bit more practicality to the whole thing, rather than replacing you with an avatar and trying to make your face look like your current face, and every muscle that you move will move the stuff on the avatar. I don't fully understand why we need to go to that on that route.
Well, what about the question I proposed to Alex just then? Do you think in 5 years the metaverse will succeed or fail? What would you say?
It depends what you mean by succeed.
Like the
VR hasn't succeeded yet. I mean, in the scale of whole thing.
Like phones. Will it replace the smartphone?
No, I don't think so. Not a meta. It depends how you define the metaverse also.
Yeah.
If it's a completely immersive thing, I don't think so. I think
Ready Player One. That you've seen that movie, I imagine, or the book.
For gaming, maybe.
Yeah,
but not in real life.
Not for the average person.
No.
Okay.
But I do believe that AR will have, as long as it can be miniaturized, which is the main problem at the moment.
Yeah.
So you can't walk with your mobile pointing at things. You have to have some other stuff, either your earphones or your glasses or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But the problem with that, it's a miniaturization thing.
Yeah.
But I think the value of that, because it augments what we already have rather than replacing what we already have, which is a case of VR.
Yeah.
I think it will have a broader application.
Oh yeah, the Google Glass concept. I know it looks terrible.
Yeah.
It's the holy grail for any tech company. That's what they all want to build, because then you've got maps, you've got little text message alerts coming in. You can take calls, and then you get personalised ads, coming at you with which you can't escape because it's on your head. That's like
that's the sort of nightmare solution.
Yeah, but it's what will happen, because they've got to find a way to monetize it somehow. But what about your view on the metaverse succeeding, failing? What would your opinion be?
Yeah. So. I remember making a mistake during the first peak of over expectation for self-driving car technology. And I had a very long debate with some of my friends around when it'll be adopted. And I promised everyone, this might have been about 5 to 10 years ago.
Okay.
It'll be dominant in society in 2 years. I promise you. There's no way I'm wrong. So I've learned very hard to make. I've learned to not make those sorts of predictions. My direct answer is I don't think it'll achieve the kind of wide adoption that you're describing in 5 years' time. I do think long term what you're describing is likely. We kind of discussed. For me, one of the biggest blockers towards that adoption is just like consumer sexiness. Like the devices are quite bulky, they're quite hard. There's these kind of physical problems that you're talking about before. Once that's solved, and these things can be looks as seamless as an Apple Watch or I'm giving them free promo, as a digital watch or a phone. I do think once that gap is removed, you probably will be able to get a lot wider adoption. But at this point, you're probably looking at almost a slightly different evolution of the entire metaverse concept. Yeah. And I think one more thing that's I've been thinking a little bit more recently. I saw a Twitter thread on the Apple Vision Pro product. I'm not sure whether this facts or not, but someone was claiming that some of the tech that powers it is also EEG, so kind of the brain-computer interface technology, and it will also kind of read signals through your neural patterns to try and make smarter predictions around how to manipulate pixels and the sort of algorithmic side of things. Once that technology bridges beyond kind of a vision immersive and maybe physical immersive experience into actually the depths of our minds and kind of bordering on consciousness, I do think long-term future, not 5 years here. I'm talking much longer than that. You're probably looking at a really compelling case for a new way of living and consuming technology. That I do think is quite kind of interesting, but it's just super long term.
A ton of stories on the Neuralink and similar types of platforms. And when you start, like a brain chip would replace the glasses because it'd just be instant thoughts. It's probably a bit further away, right? Yeah. But ultimately these are all stepping stones. VR is a stepping stone to small portable AR in glasses. Maybe a little bit thicker than this, and then that's a stepping stone to connecting it to muscles and the brain, and then ultimately a chip. Would be the end goal. I don't know if that'd be good or bad, but
something interesting in what you said about the self-driving cars, because I can see the full use case for that. Imagine the time that we will gain by not having to drive the car.
Absolutely.
While if I think about VR, apart from some, I would still call them niche applications. Again, I think that the power in training is fantastic for VR application. I don't see why we want to live in a completely different world, completely isolated from ours, unless the real world and the virtual world, like in augmented reality, are sort of moving into each other and blending and doing that sort of stuff. So I think it will be driven by the sexiness in a way, because you'll always have Apple selling sexy stuff, and a few other companies, but it will also be driven by the usability and usefulness.